Hello and welcome to another episode of a Wicked Parley. I am your host, Justin, and today we're going to be discussing greed. And more importantly than anything else, is greed good? I pose this question to all of our viewers. Please share your comments, in the description box below or something along those lines. Or in the chat. Somewhere where words are found.
Somewhere we can see it and read it.
Yeah. Also, I want to just say thank you to our Patreon supporter. Thank you very much. And I also would like to know, what future content would you like to see on Patreon? What kind of things specifically would you like? Because I had some articles that I found that are interesting coming for all you Patreon supporters out there, or people who want to be. But I'm curious to know what you guys would potentially want.
Yes, thank you for your support.
Yes, thank you. All right.
That is a lot louder than I remember.
You know what, though? It's great, though, that way. I love it that way, so it's fine. All right, and hi, host. Welcome to the show. Hey, glad to see you there. Okay, so, honestly, when it comes down to talking about greed, there are a couple really delicate things that some people could construe. And they're going to go, okay, well, hey, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't talk about this in this particular way. And I just want this to be said now. Let's leave it all on the floor. All right, let's talk about fucking everything.
Get it all out in the open.
There is no negative or no, we'll say, anything bad that could happen to you. Let's just talk about it. Everything and anything that comes to mind when it comes to discussing greed. Because, it's not a pretty subject necessarily, but it is a fun one. So I'd say, hey, let's go ahead and jump in and talk about it. I also see Backseat is back. Hi, Backseat. Nice to see you again. All right. So one of the things that I personally want to talk about has to do with some of the real world implications when someone who is particularly greedy does something in the world that is a greedy action, and what are the direct consequences to the immediate people surrounding. And I kind of want to pose this question to the chat, to the viewers in the future, and actually to you, Rose. What do you think are some of the consequences of someone being too greedy to their peers?
The immediate thought that comes to mind is people kind of shoving them away for either thinking they're being too selfish or too, resource taking, like they're taking everything, kind of what's getting left for us type of scenario. Mm-hmm. Like that's one immediate thought. Another thought is kind of maybe the underlying thought of, what do they need this for? Is it something nefarious, or is it like they're that, self-centered type of scenario?
Mm-hmm. So you're in your head, you're kind of weighing whether or not the action that's considered greedy, is it for like personal gain, or is it for like, perhaps maybe a better purpose? Maybe they're greedy to some extent, but maybe it's kind of like a Robin Hood situation where they take from the rich and give to the poor kind of thing, but maybe something different.
Kind of like that, because for me, if you want my thoughts about it, greed is kind of in the same boat as being selfish, just more easily trackable, because purchases are trackable.
Yeah, I mean,
as long as they're above board.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can understand that they're both in the same neighborhood when it comes to human emotions and behavior.
So you can be selfish for good reasons, just like you can kind of be greedy for good reasons. Kind of, if you're greedy because you want yourself to succeed above all others at the cost of others, for me, that's like, I will punch you.
Okay.
But if you're seen as greedy, but let's say you're trying to get a bunch of money, but you're doing this to like either donating to a charity or because, hey, a family member's in a medical emergency type of situation. Like, that's a little bit better in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand
because
that.
It's like, you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for someone, even if it is partially for yourself too, but it's not, solely yourself.
Yeah, I see that Backseat's got a great little response. You want to go ahead and read it?
Yeah, Backseat says that greed is inherent to survival. We need things to live, which to me makes sense.
I would say like there's a perspective to that I think there's a grain of truth there, but I think that there's a difference between let's say hypothetically being sort of greedy by taking all the food in comparison to perhaps someone who is like, I'm going to be greedy because I'm going to take all of the resources that everyone else needs to survive. So I mean, there is a difference there. So
Like one of the immediate things I can think of somebody being greedy, like they want to be greedy for the sake of personal, gain.
mm-hmm.
Scalpers.
No, fuck, no, hell no, 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 no.
I said
we're
it was
not,
a bad example.
no, we're not going to scalpers. I'm gonna fucking lose it. We're not gonna talk about those fucking bastards.
I mean, if you want a visceral example, there's one.
No. I will fucking kill any scalpers.
See? Example of a bad version of greed. Extremely bad, but all right. It got him to react like that, so.
I mean, honestly, when it comes down to greed, I think that there is sort of something that we need to kind of be able to kind of at least define what's the difference between something that is considered greedy and someone who is, surviving. Because with backseats, like both of your responses, it kind of indicates clearly to me that we probably need to kind of like, hey, we need to clearly define this.
Yeah.
And so at least I'm going to put this in kind of like my perspective of greed. Greed is when you take something that others need in addition to yourself, and then those particular elements are taken to an extreme. So while yes, you might need a certain portion of food to survive, you do not need all of the food. And so like to me, I think that's an example of greed. But I also can understand kind of where Backseat's coming from, because if you think about it, there is a biological imperative to acquire things to survive. And, depending upon your viewpoint and your lens, there could be a huge difference between, let's say, hypothetically, someone who is, being surviving and also someone who is technically being greedy. So, there is a distinction there to be observed. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Also, you want to go ahead and read Host's comment?
Yeah, host says that Nikola Tesla wanted to make an electric death ray. It's good, but in a roundabout way.
Right.
I did not want to do.
Okay. All right.
Okay then.
Okay. Right.
I don't want to go near a death ray. Thank you very much.
No.
Knowing my luck, I would trip, fall, and set that thing off on myself.
Oh my gosh. All right, enough about that. I actually think that kind of what Backseat kind of mentioned kind of reminded me about something that's I think is kind of important to discuss, is the fact that in society there is this tendency that's particularly influenced by societies that highly value independence, and that is that we kind of encourage people to be somewhat greedy. We kind of glorify greed in certain circumstances. An excellent example is how we glorify wealth and status. And we use wealth as a status symbol to indicate that you are better than the rest. And depending upon how that wealth was acquired, it could have huge impacts on the way in which their immediate surroundings of people, live. Because let's say, like, you look at a CEO of a company, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
On average, a CEO makes 10,000 times what their base employee does, in comparison. And can you imagine the different lives that they live? So
yeah,
could you make? Because I think the statement could be mentioned, or at least could be stated, that maybe the CEO is a bit greedy in those kinds of instances. But yeah. Anyways, also I see Kyle joined the live stream. Hi, Kyle. What's going on? Good to see you. Kyle, I'm not sure if you saw the question in the chat, but how do you feel about greed? What do you think is greedy? Feel free to respond whenever. Right, moving on. One of the things that I think is kind of interesting also to kind of point out is that, and also, Backseat kind of was on the right track, I think, at least in some instances. Greed inherently is a survival instinct. One of the main things that helps us all survive is making sure that we got the most food, the best access to water, the most land, the most shelter, the best shelter. And those things inherently don't just happen overnight, and they don't just happen to everybody. You have to be somewhat, ambitious and a little bit greedy to get those things. And so that might be something to consider. as an explanation for why greed persists in society today, is maybe because there's this underlying element that's connected to humans in general. That's at our core. What about your thoughts on that, Rose?
One of the immediate things I thought of while you were talking, to be honest, was the attitude of people, especially around Black Friday. Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like, I started thinking, people fighting for things, being considered greedy or like wanting things over others, and that was my immediate thought. That was just Black Friday shopping. Like, oh.
Yeah, definitely.
As for the whole greed isn't kind of inherent to survival, it just makes sense to me because there's such a thing as, I've mentioned it before, as being too selfless, to the point where it's a detriment, because it's like you have to be able to survive, and to do that you need to take so that later on you can give.
Yeah.
You can't just keep giving and hope that something works out, because if you keep giving you're going to have nothing left for yourself, and that's where being selfish or being greedy comes in to save you from giving away way too much that you can't handle it.
Yeah, that I definitely agree with. I mean, I think when it comes to like just taking a side on this, when it comes to this issue, answering at least the question of the thumbnail and the channel for the the episode.
Is greed good?
Yeah, is greed good? I'm just going to answer it from my perspective. I think it's not good, but I also think it's a necessary function. Like I think that like greed is kind of like the marshmallow at the end of the stick. It's the thing that we all are trying to chase. And whether it be money, land, some sort of trinket or special thing, needing something to aspire to or to attempt to gain, I think gives our lives meaning. That's kind of sad if you think about it, but I also think it's something that's kind of true.
One of those, it's a necessary bad type of thing.
Yeah, I do. I mean, like, it's not like every single culture kind of values things the same way. So like if we were talking about like, let's say money, right? Like all people have an idea that money is valuable, right?
Yeah.
Or at least they have a semblance of an idea.
Some form of currency.
Yes. But not necessarily having currency doesn't necessarily make you greedy. Maybe you're fortunate, maybe you're lucky, whatever, right? Maybe you didn't earn it, you just have it. But
inheritance.
But for the people who do, start from nothing and work their way up, they had to showcase some level of tendencies that indicated that, okay, I need to get this, or I'm doing this. And, you could say that those particular tendencies are inherently greedy. And so, like, to me, I think it's a showcase of, in order for things to get done, you need people to be greedy. But I think greed is bad. That's my take on it.
Unnecessary evil.
Yeah. What about you?
For me, answering the question of is greed good?
Yeah.
For me, it's kind of I don't like it. I can agree it's necessary, but for the extremes that come to my mind whenever I think of greed, because I think of the like extremes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely no. To keep it short and simple, but kind of like selfishness, I kind of think just if you keep it tiny, like a little smidge, little pinch, and you just use it for survival instincts, then I'm just, it's just natural for me.
Okay. I'm curious for you guys out there. What is your guys' idea about greed? Is greed good? Go feel free to answer the question at your leisure. And if you're watching this in the future, feel free to email the show with your response. I'd be happy to read it, and I'll shoot you back a message telling what I think, if you'd like. Okay. Let's go ahead and let's talk about a couple things that I think is kind of fun to consider.
Okay.
Well, I would say fun to consider, but maybe more like interesting. Okay. What do you think people who are witnessing a person do a specifically greedy act are thinking? Do you think that those particular people are looking down at that person? Do you think they're being envious? What's the emotions you think is going through the mind of somebody who's watching someone just be just filthy greedy?
I think those emotions are definitely based on what type of upbringing the person watching kind of has. You know, if they're upper tier, high class, they
Mm-hmm.
might not think of anything of it. But if you know are lower class, you're coming from a place of poverty or you've had less and you've had to deal with less,
Mm-hmm.
you might be a little more angry, a little more, wanting some form of justice because you've had to probably work so hard and you're still getting less than this person who's just taking everything without a care in the world.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I'm thinking it kind of depends on, what background you come from. Because if you're coming from a person who, well, if you're coming from a background where you've had to deal with less, I think you'd feel more negative emotion about it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're higher, you may not feel anything at all because it's like you don't care enough for it, or it's just you think that's natural.
Yeah.
At least that's my opinion.
I mean, I definitely can understand where you're coming from, and I find myself agreeing with you in some cases. I mean, honestly, when I think about that situation, right, I think that there's a very high tendency to, depending on the. All right, let me explain. Let me go back. Let me take a couple steps back. I'm like,
We moved a little too fast. We ran before we walked.
Exactly. I just kind of tripped over my tongue, folks. Sorry about that. So when it comes to discussing which societal group we're looking at, we can look at it from, Western culture, or we can look at it from different cultural perspectives that are going to be somewhat unique. Each culture is going to look at that situation differently, and as such, depending upon the example, I'm going to assume that we're going to be in a Western culture. And in Western culture, that circumstance and situation is going to showcase more like reverence, or at least respect for a person who's going to be greedy. And so I think that a person is going to be more likely impressed or in awe rather than horrified, which might happen in a different cultural setting. So, yeah. Let's talk about a little bit of these messages, starting with
Sure.
Kyle's response.
Oh, the first one?
Yes.
All right. So Kyle thinks that Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob is a good case study in greed. He was the greediest character in the show, but when he tried to be selfless, he almost went bankrupt.
Yeah, that makes some sense.
That is a dog in the back.
Yeah. You got a pooch in the background.
Apparently.
That's okay. Interruptions are okay. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like the fictional character. But yeah, I mean, it isn't surprising that when a person, who spends their entire time being greedy suddenly reverses, you're going to have a disastrous impact. I mean, like, think about it like this. Like, take an example of a person who doesn't exercise, right? If you don't exercise at all, and then one day you decide to exercise, right? You might have a heart attack. You are going to be in pain because you did something that's completely different. Now, depending upon the circumstance and situation, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. But like in my particular case, like my viewpoint on this is that I think that like if a real life person who was like Mr. Krabs existed and he was greedy all the time and then suddenly he decided to be selfless and goes almost bankrupt, then I think it's probably good for society but bad for him. And if we're depending upon where you stand on certain ideas like what's good for one versus the many, greater good concepts, that
is a moral dilemma I do not want to deal with.
Yeah, the morality of that particular circumstance is a bit questionable, but in my particular sense, I would say that it's probably better to be less greedy, and so in that case, then I would say being bankrupt is probably penance for being greedy for so long. But I don't know, that's just me. Let's respond to host's response.
All right. So host states that greed is like stress. Too much is bad, too little is bad. The right amount lets us push the envelope of what's possible.
Okay, so it's like salt.
I suppose.
Too much, too little, very bad. Just enough, just right. Okay. I mean,
Freaking Goldilocks story here.
I mean, honestly, like I think host, you're probably like I think it's the most correct answer. I think that the truth is that greed is a necessary evil, but doing too much or too little puts you in a bad spot. So being just greedy enough not to piss off everybody around you, but also being but also keeping an idea of how far you're going to be selfless, so that way you keep on to enough of your stuff. So kind of makes sense.
That was not a sentence I wanted to read.
Our brain is a salty banana. Thank you, host. Thank you so very much for that.
Oh, the image.
God.
Anyway, can we move?
Yeah, that's just
Please
weird.
move on.
Yeah, okay. All right. So let's respond to Kyle's response.
What I find interesting is that the poorest people tend to form networks that distribute resources, so they can't really be greedy.
Oh, I would disagree with that wholeheartedly.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Think about it. Okay, so first of all, most people don't know this or not, but I was born into a very poor family. And so I saw what happened in poor communities often. And what ends up often happening is that resources get sucked into whomever basically has the most power and is usually very, very greedy. So
Hey.
poor communities, the poorest of poor people typically aren't greedy at all, but poor people can be very greedy and stingy and hold on to anything that comes their way. So it's not that network is an idealistic version, and what we hope would be what happens, but is often not a reflection of reality. So, I mean, but I mean, hey, you know, I mean, if it worked that way everywhere, that'd be great.
That'd be good.
And then Kyle had one more thing, right?
Yeah. Carl also adds, I think greed is bad and unnecessary. If greed is hoarding, the opposite isn't waste. The opposite is charity. In this view, greed is unnecessary.
Okay, all right, but here's. Okay, all right. Let's play. Let's play a little game, shall we? Let's play a little game.
Are we pulling up the?
No, not that one. Not yet.
Okay.
So basically, imagine you had a bag of peanuts, and this bag had an unbelievable amount of peanuts. It had. You could almost say it has an infinite number of peanuts. However,
Yay!
You can only pull out one peanut at a time.
Okay.
And every time you pull out a peanut, you have to decide to either split the peanut in half or flip a coin to who gets the peanut.
Huh?
Yeah. So, like, there's a person in front of you, right?
Okay.
And so you either have to split the peanut in half, right?
Okay.
And you get one half, and they get one half. Or
Okay.
you flip a coin, and whoever wins the coin flip gets the whole peanut.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, this is a simplified version of distribution. Just roll with me on this, okay?
Okay.
All right. If you take the coin flip route, then roughly speaking, you'd think 50% of whatever the total number of peanuts is in a long enough time period, right?
Uh-huh.
Or you could take half the peanut, right? And then you know for a fact that you get half your peanut, right?
Okay.
But the thing is that you don't know how long you'd have to run it for the odds to equal out to a 50-50 point. And so if you were to take into that consideration, what ends up often happening is that discrepancies happen and someone always gets a little more resources than the other. And when one person gets more resources than the other, it creates a runaway effect where they get ever more resources, which also shrink the available resources of other people. And so that inherently is kind of like the issue at hand when it comes to that, which is the reason why I think that, like, greed can't be unnecessary, because it is a certain outcome. It's an outcome that is going to happen no matter what, as long as resources are non-infinite or are controlled for anything. So even if it was an infinite resource, if you have a level of control over it, then you inherently create inequality. So, yeah, unfortunately, at least that's my take on it. Now, I'm not saying I'm right. I could be wrong. I'm willing to admit that I could be wrong, but I would say that there is a lot of evidence to kind of support my thinking on it. and I'm of course open to any information that anyone would like to share. Or you can just email the show, Wicked Parley at gmail.com. If you
Or
have,
join the Discord.
or join the Discord, yeah, on Tuesdays or Thursdays. Sometimes I pop in on a Thursday. I'm trying to be better about it, but there are reasons.
Things are a little hectic.
Yes, so I can't
More
always
than
make it.
hectic.
Yeah. Okay. And with that, let's go ahead and play a little bit of a fun little game. Just that way we can kind of, get away from it. Do you want to go over the specifics, Rose?
Sure. So this is essentially, we're going to show you about 3 or so pictures, and your goal is to find things that are kind of different, kind of weird about the picture. There's going to be a number of them. Not going to tell you exactly how many, because that's also part of the game. And we'll see how many you can spot. Each picture will be up for about 15, 20 seconds.
Let's give him 20 seconds.
20?
Mm-hmm.
Every picture will be up for 20 seconds, and your goal is to find the things that are different. Oh, geez, that is my mirror. So, all right, let's get this tiny game started.
All right.
Just gotta pull it up. Bunk. All right, we will go for 20 seconds. Should we
Anyways,
tell them what they're searching for, or should we
I,
just leave it?
no, I'll just leave it. I'll just see
Leave
if they catch it or not. Yeah, no. So I mean, when it comes down to,
You might want a full screen.
yeah, you definitely want a full screen. But yeah, when it comes down to discussing certain elements of greed, there's one concept that a lot of people kind of, let's say, like, don't consider, is the fact that greed often has a runaway effect. Where if one person's greedy, it's going to influence another person's greed, and it just keeps going and going and going and going. And it perpetuates a style, or we'll say a system perhaps, of one person being greedy while the rest of another group are being used. So, yeah. I see Kyle's response. Want to go ahead and read Kyle's response while we're letting people look through it?
All right. Had myself muted because I was typing.
I see.
What you described sounds like an artificial product of our economy rather than a natural thing. Early, quote, primitive, unquote, societies, from what we see with archaeology, was a very equal society. This is, I believe, in response to your whole greed is kind of a natural thing if it's an non-infinite resource or a infinite resource that is being controlled.
Yes. Okay. All right, let's move to the next slide, by the way.
Sure.
So when it comes to the response, I would say that my opinion is not based actually off of our current economy. It's actually based off of the old barter system of the Middle Ages. But more specifically, it could be. It very much could be. I just think that, like, our viewpoint on cultures of the very, very distant past is very incomplete. We don't, like, for instance, like, if you go to a site where, perhaps Native Americans lived, 800, 900 years ago, right? You don't find much. You find some tools. You might find, like, some areas where maybe they went to the bathroom, so you got an idea of their diet. You might find maybe some sort of structures. But, you don't really know too much about them. And that's just one example, right? There's certainly some cultures we know a lot more about. And in some of those cases, you're certainly right. I'm not saying that every culture is, the same. but I definitely think that there is examples, a lot of examples actually, of societies not being necessarily equal. The thing is that like what hallmarks is greed, right? You know, in our culture, greed could be established as money. It could be established as properties or cars. But you know, you could also look at it as the person who hunts and takes all of the animal pelts, or you know, maybe is the person who gives all of, you know, takes all of the fish that are available, you know, in the river or something like that, right? And maybe doesn't share. You know, like our measure of what is greedy is not exactly a whole and complete picture. And as such, we should be considering how many other options and situations could be different in regards to that. So, I mean, like I said before, it's very possible that I'm wrong. I'm very much willing to admit that it's possible, but your statement to me has not swayed my position. But if you want to present more evidence, if you want to show some like more examples, be happy to go through it.
All right, third picture has been set and complete.
Excellent.
So
Okay.
we shall see what everybody has gotten to find.
Yeah. Hopefully, you guys all found the interesting things I think, right?
Hopefully, because we, you know, what we find interesting might be, you know, not as much to them. It's not like we told them, you know, what to search for.
That's correct. Yeah, we just kind of was like, hey, go for it, right?
It's like, hey, what looks interesting to you? What are you finding that's weird? I'm still laughing at one of them. Apparently, in the second picture, one person that, you know, I wasn't paying attention, but one of them found a kid in a stroller that was essentially just knocked out cold.
That's great. Go ahead and throw the answers.
Sure. So, what we were hoping for people to find that is really weird on the formatting, whatever. So, in slide 1, there were 5 hidden Spider-Man. In slide 2, there were 5 hidden Wolverine. In slide 3, there were 4 Spider-Man and 4 Wolverine. One of each, you know, not really hidden at all because they were part of the picture. Did you find them all? And bonus points if you noticed the little guy. I don't know if we want to, you know, show them the locations or anything like that.
No, that's fine.
Nah?
No, if you guys want to see the locations, go ahead and go back to...
You can go back and pause.
Yeah, there you go.
I will admit, some of them are pretty darn tiny.
They are tiny, but they are there.
They are there.
Yeah. Okay, so... Very good, Kyle. Very good. All right, so when it comes to talking about greed, there is one other key element that I want to make sure that we kind of get a chance to discuss when it comes to that, and that is the fact that if we allow greed to dictate the way in which our society functions, then I believe that we are going to have some pretty big problems. It's going to be a level of damage that we may not be able to reverse. You know, we allow many people, hundreds of people, to essentially, you know, have access to roughly 99% of the world's resources. You know, 1% of the population
Kind of
controls
ridiculous.
about 99%.
Really ridiculous.
Yes. And that right there is just a level of inequality that I don't think we can continue. I think that if we allow these sorts of things to exist, then we are going to like collapse. The whole structure can't be held up for very long.
We would be in trouble.
Yeah. What are your thoughts directly about that?
About allowing greed to have some dictation over, you know, how society works.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately sounds like the Purge.
The Purge? No. We're not purging. We're not purging anybody.
No, that was a movie where it's just, oh boy.
I was thinking like Rick and Morty when you said Purge.
Oh no, I was talking like the movie.
Oh, I know you're talking about the movie, but I'm just saying like it just Rick and Morty popped in my head the moment that you said Purge. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, for me it'd be kind of if we let greed control our society, those who are extremely greedy would probably kind of run over everyone else.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't want to be run over.
Yeah, I mean, the people who are most affected, are usually the people who are in the lower SES, the socioeconomic status. Those are the people who are most affected by the people who are at the very top. The people with the very little. It's just unfortunate that they make such a large portion of the population.
Mm-hmm. Although that does bring up the idea of if they're put into too far of a corner, what type of chaos is going to occur when that happens, Because a person can only be pushed so far.
I mean, people, rebel all the time. I mean, that's one of the main things that, like, I'd be concerned about. The United States has so many flaws. But it also is a pretty wonderful place where opportunity exists for just about anybody who's willing to put it in the work. And that's not something that you can find too much of elsewhere in the world. And so I would hate to see that people basically got too greedy and ruined probably one of the best things that any society has to offer. So I just, I don't want to leave it on such a down note, but I guess I kind of have to at this point, right? I mean, that's kind of like where things are at. Yeah.
One question I have for the audience is, like, how would you fight greed?
Ooh, good question.
Like, what would you do to lessen the amount of greed in the world? How would you go about it? If you could do whatever you wanted, pass whatever law, or create materials necessary, how would you go about it to try and eliminate it if it was at all possible?
That's a good question. Do you want me to respond to my response or no?
Do you want to respond?
Nah, it's fine. Well, let's hear it from the audience. I want to give you guys a few minutes to respond to that real quick, and I want to kind of bring you up to speed on a little bit about next week's episode, because I want to make sure that you guys are interested, and also have something to perhaps ask. The next week's episode is going to be talking about social media, and talking about, do we ever over sensationalize social media? Do we ever go too far when it comes to some of those things? Like when a newscaster, for instance, talks about something in the world, sometimes they make it sound just over the top when it's not that bad, and I wonder, is that really a big issue? And is that something that we should really look into? And, based on my preliminary research, it seems like there is something there that I think is really troublesome. And so I'd like to know what you guys think about it. So feel free to email the show if you have any questions. Hopefully you'll enjoy that particular episode next Saturday. And if you have any more questions or would like to come discuss greed on Tuesday and or Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, go ahead, feel free to join the Discord. And I will be there for sure on Tuesday. Thursday is a bit in the air, but I will put an announcement on Discord to see if I'm there or not. Okay? So with that being said, I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your evening, you beautiful people. All right. This one's closed out, folks. Have a good night, everybody. Later.